Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat, designed for beings with very different body shapes than his. The Galactic Academy of Natural Sciences Advanced Xenobiology classroom buzzed with the soft sounds of various species discussing their latest assignment. Some clicked, others hummed, and a few communicated through color changes that rippled across their skin. The human exchange student had gotten used to being the only warm-blooded mammal in the room. Most of his classmates came from worlds where such creatures were rare or extinct. Their own evolutionary paths had taken very different turns from Earth's. Professor Gray, a crystalline being who floated at the front of the room, dimmed their outer glow to signal the start of class. Their voice resonated through the room like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Today we discuss evolutionary advantages in predator species across known space. The professor's crystals chimed. Let us begin with an analysis of natural weapons. Tom watched as his classmates perked up. Rod, an aquatic species who kept themselves suspended in a floating bubble of green liquid, rippled with excitement. Next to them, a tall insectoid named Click7 straightened all 6 of their limbs in anticipation. First, Professor Gray continued, let us examine the basic traits of successful predator species. Who would like to start? Rod's bubble wobbled as they raised an appendage. Superior sensory organs, Professor. Like my species' ability to detect pressure changes from 50 body lengths away. Excellent. What else? Click7's mandibles clattered softly. Multiple natural weapons, claws, fangs, venom glands. Redundancy ensures survival. The professor's crystals sparkled with approval. Very good. Now, let us examine our visiting student species. Tom, humans are considered a successful spacefaring race. Yet you seem to lack these basic advantages. Would you care to explain? All eyes, sensory organs, and detection arrays turned toward Tom. He noticed some of his classmates had that familiar look, the one that mixed pity with confusion. Here was a creature with no claws, no venom, no armor, and only basic senses. How had such a soft species ever survived? Well, Tom started, choosing his words carefully. Humans come from a world that required different adaptations. Rod's liquid rippled with what Tom had learned was their version of laughter. Your world must be very peaceful then. On my homeworld, even the smallest creatures have at least 3 different ways to kill their prey. Tom smiled slightly, thinking of Earth's oceans. If they only knew what lurked in the depths of his home planet's seas. But that would come later. Right now, he just nodded politely. Professor Gray drifted closer to Tom. Indeed, this brings us to an interesting point. Humans are classified as persistence predators, yet they've achieved spaceflight without developing what we consider essential survival traits. This suggests either remarkable luck or the professor's crystals shifted to a questioning purple hue. Or perhaps, Click7 chittered, their world simply didn't require such adaptations. Many soft worlds produce soft species. The class murmured in agreement. Tom noticed Rod's bubble rippling with pride as they demonstrated their natural ability to generate small electrical pulses, a hunting technique their species had evolved over millions of years. Look at their teeth, one student whispered. Not even properly sharp. And only 2 eyes, another added. How do they see behind themselves? No wonder they needed to develop tools so early, Rod commented. They must have been terrified of everything. Tom kept his face neutral, but inside he was smiling. He thought about tomorrow's presentation on Earth's apex predators. He thought about the great white shark footage he had prepared. He thought about their reactions when they learned humans hadn't just survived alongside such creatures. They'd turned them into tourist attractions. Professor Gray's crystals shifted to a teaching frequency. Now let us examine successful predator species from Class 4 worlds. Tom settled back in his uncomfortable chair. Sometimes being underestimated had its advantages. After all, tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. The next day, Professor Gray's crystals glowed with an excited blue light as they addressed the class. Today begins our most anticipated project of the term. Each of you will present on the apex predators of your homeworld. Tom watched as his classmates straightened in their seats. Even the usually lazy gas cloud being in the back corner condensed with interest. "We will start," Professor Gray chimed, with Rod. "Please share with us the hunters of your ocean world." Rod's containment bubble floated to the front of the room. They connected to the classroom's holoprojector, and suddenly the room was filled with images of their homeworld's seas. The water was a deep purple, thick with nutrients and strange life. "This," Rod said proudly, "is the blade swimmer." The hologram showed a creature that looked like a cross between a torpedo and a knife collection. Its body was covered in naturally occurring metallic scales that formed razor-sharp edges. As it swam, it literally cut through the water, leaving a trail of split molecules behind it. It hunts by swimming through schools of prey, letting its edges do the work. One pass can cut hundreds of victims, Rod explained, their own fluid rippling with pride. They can detect movement from 2 kilometers away. The class murmured appreciatively. Tom took notes on his datapad, genuinely impressed, but also trying to hide his small smile. Earth's sharks might not have metal scales, but they had something just as effective: millions of years of perfect evolution. Next came Click 7's presentation. The insectoid pulled up images of a massive creature that looked like a walking tank. "The ground crusher," they chittered excitedly. "It uses sonic pulses to liquefy the internal organs of its prey from a distance of 50 meters. More impressed sounds from the class. Professor Gray's crystals sparkled with approval. The gas cloud being, who went by Mist, demonstrated a floating predator that hunted by dropping toxic crystals on its prey from high altitudes. "The crystal rain hunter," they announced proudly. "Nothing survives the toxins. Nothing." Presentation after presentation showed incredible creatures. Some hunted in packs, others were solitary killers. Some used advanced natural weapons, others relied on sheer size and strength. Tom kept taking notes, his smile growing slightly with each one. Finally, Professor Gray turned their crystalline form toward Tom. "And tomorrow, we will hear from our human student. Though perhaps," they paused, crystals shifting to a gentle purple, "we should keep our expectations reasonable. Earth is, after all, classified as a moderate threat world." Rod's bubble vibrated with barely contained amusement. "Do humans even have apex predators? I thought you were the top species on your world." Tom looked up from his datapad. "Oh, we're definitely not the top predators. Not naturally, anyway." This caught the class's attention. Click 7's antennae twitched. "But you said humans hunt for sport now. Surely that means you've conquered all other hunters." "Not exactly," Tom said, carefully keeping his voice neutral. "We've just learned to avoid them. Mostly." Mist condensed with curiosity. "Them. There's more than one species that can hunt humans." "Oh yes," Tom nodded, checking that his presentation files were ready for tomorrow. "Quite a few, actually. But I think you'll find the ones from our oceans particularly interesting." Rod's bubble rippled with disbelief. "Your oceans? But your land creatures. Surely your ocean predators are simple things." Professor Gray raised an appendage for silence. "We will all learn about Earth's hunters tomorrow. Though I must remind the class that Earth is primarily water-covered, so perhaps their crystals shifted to a thoughtful blue. Perhaps there are surprises waiting for us." Tom packed up his things as class ended. He had spent hours preparing tomorrow's presentation, making sure the footage would display properly on the alien holographic systems. He had carefully selected clips that showed great whites hunting seals, breaching the water, and testing their prey's defenses. As he left the classroom, he heard Rod talking to Click 7. How dangerous could their ocean predators be? They don't even live in the water. Tom smiled. Tomorrow was going to be fun. The classroom fell quiet as Tom walked to the front. He connected his datapad to the holoprojector and took a deep breath. Behind him, a blue marble appeared. Earth, as seen from space. "Before I show you our predators," Tom began, "you need to understand where they live. He zoomed in on the planet's surface. 71% of Earth is covered in water. Our oceans have an average depth of about 4 kilometers. Rod's bubble swayed dismissively. Many worlds have oceans. Mine are deeper. True, Tom nodded. But here's something interesting. Humans have only explored about 20% of our oceans. The classroom suddenly got very quiet. Professor Gray's crystals shifted to a confused yellow. Excuse me, but did you say only 20%? How can a spacefaring species not have explored their own world? Tom smiled. Because it's dangerous. The pressure at full depth can crush most of our submarines. The water is dark, cold, and filled with things we still don't fully understand. Click 7's antennae twitched nervously. But you said humans hunt for sport. How can you be afraid of water? We're not afraid, Tom corrected. We're respectful. Because in those waters live some of the most perfectly evolved predators in known space. He tapped his datapad, and the hologram changed to show ocean currents. And at the top of that food chain sits a creature that has remained nearly unchanged for over 400 million years. The class watched as Tom brought up a simple diagram, a streamlined shape that everyone recognized as a basic water-dwelling predator. Professor Gray's crystals brightened with interest. This is a shark, Tom said. Specifically, a great white shark. They're not our biggest ocean predator, or even our most dangerous. They're just perfect. Rod's bubble rippled with amusement. Perfect. It looks so simple. Where are its weapons? Tom touched his datapad again. Let me show you their sensory system first. They can detect electrical impulses as small as 500 millionths of a volt. They can sense a single drop of blood in 100 liters of water. Their whole body can feel vibrations in the water from kilometers away. The class grew quieter. Rod's bubble stopped rippling. They have multiple rows of teeth. Tom continued, bringing up a detailed scan. When one tooth breaks, another rolls forward to replace it. They can lose and regrow up to 50,000 teeth in their lifetime. Professor Gray floated closer to examine the diagram. Fascinating. And you say these are not even your most dangerous predators? No, Tom said. But they're special because they're what we call an apex predator. In their habitat, nothing hunts them. They have no natural predators. He paused, looking at Rod. Would you like to see one hunting? Rod's bubble contracted slightly, but they raised an appendage in agreement. Tom started the video. The classroom watched in stunned silence as a great white shark breached the water's surface, its entire 3-meter length launching into the air with a seal in its jaws. The raw power, the speed, the precision. It was unlike anything they had seen. That's at 40 kilometers per hour, Tom explained calmly. They can swim faster when they need to. Their skin has evolved tiny structures that reduce drag in the water. Their bodies are basically living torpedoes. How? Rod's voice wavered. How big do they get? Great whites, usually around 4 to 5 meters, but they're actually medium-sized for a shark. We have bigger ones. Click 7's mandibles clattered softly. And humans swim in these waters. We surf on them, Tom said. That means we ride waves for fun, right above where sharks swim. Sometimes we even cage dive with them, get in special containers to watch them up close. Professor Gray's crystals had shifted to a deep blue of fascination. Tom, you said earlier that humans aren't the top predators on Earth. I'm beginning to understand why. There's more to show us, isn't there? Tom nodded, his finger hovering over his datapad. Oh yes, we haven't even gotten to the really interesting parts yet. Tom touched his datapad again, and the classroom's lights dimmed automatically. The hologram shifted to show underwater footage of a great white shark gliding smoothly through deep blue water. What you're about to see, Tom said quietly, is natural hunting behavior, no special effects, no enhancements. Just pure evolution at work. The class watched as the shark circled beneath a seal. Rod's containment bubble had drifted to the back of the room, as far from the hologram as possible. Even Professor Gray's crystals had dimmed to watch more intently. "Notice how the shark is swimming below its prey," Tom explained. "They almost always attack from underneath. It makes it harder for the prey to see them coming." He paused as the shark in the hologram started to move faster. They don't just rely on their eyes. Right now, this shark is using multiple senses at once. The footage showed the shark suddenly accelerating upward. Its powerful tail propelled it toward the surface at incredible speed. The seal didn't even have time to react before massive jaws opened and closed around it. Click 7's mandibles clattered in shock. The force of that bite. How strong are they? "Around 3,000 pounds of pressure per bite," Tom said. "But it's not just the bite force. Those teeth you see." He zoomed in on the shark's mouth. "They're serrated, like biological saw blades, and they're not just for killing. They help the shark learn about things it encounters." "Learn?" Professor Gray's crystals pulsed with curiosity. "Yes, sharks don't have hands to explore things, so when they're curious about something, they take what we call a test bite. Unfortunately, even a curious shark can do a lot of damage without meaning to." The hologram changed to show a different angle, this time of a shark breaching the surface at full speed, its entire body clearing the water. Several students flinched at the display of raw power. "Their whole body is a weapon," Tom continued. "That skin I mentioned earlier, it's made of tiny tooth-like scales called dermal denticles. They're so rough they can tear flesh just by brushing against it. Some ancient human warriors even used shark skin as armor." Rod's bubble trembled slightly. "And you said humans swim in the same waters as these creatures." "We do." Tom brought up new footage, this time showing surfers on waves while dark shapes moved beneath them. These people are surfing right above a great white hunting ground. They know the sharks are there. They choose to surf anyway. "But why?" Rod's voice was barely a whisper. "Because humans learned something important early in our evolution," Tom explained. "We learned that understanding a predator is better than fearing it. Great whites aren't mindless killers. They're highly intelligent, curious creatures. They can remember interactions with specific boats and divers. They can learn from experience. Some of them even seem to have individual personalities." The classroom was dead silent now. Professor Gray floated forward. "Tom, earlier you mentioned these were medium-sized sharks. What did you mean by that?" Tom smiled. "Well, the great white isn't our largest living shark species. That would be the whale shark, though it's a filter feeder. But if you're asking about predatory sharks," he tapped his datapad again. "Let me show you what we found in our fossil records." Before he could start the next part of his presentation, Click 7 raised a limb. "Wait, you keep saying our fossil records, our oceans, but how can humans claim ownership of waters filled with such creatures?" "That's a good question," Tom said. "The truth is, we don't own the oceans. We can't. No one can. But here's something that might surprise you. Humans aren't trying to conquer these predators anymore. In fact, we're trying to protect them." The confused silence that followed was exactly what Tom had been waiting for. Now it was time to explain about the Megalodon, and why humans considered great whites to be relatively small sharks. Tom paused his presentation and looked around the classroom. The stunned silence was exactly what he had expected. Now came the important part, helping them understand what it meant to be human. "Let me tell you something about early humans," he began. "When we first started walking upright, we weren't the strongest creatures around. We weren't the fastest. We didn't have the best teeth or claws. In fact, almost everything about us seemed wrong for survival." Professor Gray's crystals shifted to a thoughtful blue. "Yet here you stand." "Yes," Tom nodded, "because we had something else. We had to be smarter than the predators. We had to understand them better than they understood themselves. When you share a world with creatures like great white sharks, you learn to think differently about survival." Rod's bubble had slowly drifted forward again, curiosity overtaking fear. "But now you have weapons, technology. Surely you've eliminated these threats." Tom shook his head. That's what's interesting. We could have tried to wipe them out, but we learned something better: how to coexist. In fact, most shark species aren't actually a major threat to humans. Not a major threat. Click 7's antennae twitched in disbelief. But you just showed us their hunting capabilities. Think about it, Tom said. Humans build cities on coastlines. We swim in the ocean every day. Millions of people are in shark territory at any given moment. And yet, shark attacks are incredibly rare. On average, sharks kill fewer than 10 humans per year worldwide. The class stirred with confusion. Mist, the gas cloud being, condensed into a tight ball of surprise. How is that possible? Because they're not actually interested in eating us, Tom explained. We're not their natural prey. Most shark attacks happen because they mistake humans for seals or other marine animals. When they realize their mistake, they usually let go. Professor Gray floated closer to the hologram. You're saying these perfect predators make mistakes? All predators make mistakes, Tom said. That's something humans figured out early. No predator is perfect, no matter how well evolved they are. Sharks have been around for hundreds of millions of years, but they can still be confused by a surfboard's shape. He brought up new images, showing shark researchers working with great whites. These people study sharks up close. They've learned that each shark has its own personality. Some are curious, some are shy. They're not mindless killing machines. They're complex creatures that we're still trying to understand. Rod's bubble rippled with confusion. But earlier you said humans weren't the top predators on Earth. If sharks rarely attack humans, what did you mean? Ah, Tom smiled. I meant that naturally, in terms of pure physical capabilities, we're not the most dangerous creatures on Earth. We had to use our brains to survive among animals that could easily kill us. That's what made us different. He switched the hologram to show various human activities in the ocean: surfing, scuba diving, marine research. We turned our greatest weakness into our strength. Instead of growing bigger teeth or stronger muscles, we developed something more powerful: the ability to understand and adapt. But Click 7 seemed to be struggling with the concept. But if you can survive among such creatures, why do you seem so soft? Tom's smile widened. Because we don't need to be physically intimidating anymore. We learned a better way. And once you understand that humans evolved on a world where these predators were considered minor threats, well, maybe we're not as soft as we look. Professor Gray's crystals had taken on a deep purple hue of realization. You mentioned fossil records earlier. Are you suggesting there were even more dangerous creatures in Earth's past? Oh yes, Tom said, reaching for his datapad again. Let me tell you about the Megalodon, a shark so big it could swallow a great white hole. The classroom fell silent once more, but this time it was a silence of anticipation rather than shock. Tom adjusted the hologram settings, and suddenly the classroom was filled with the massive shape of a prehistoric shark. The scale indicator at the bottom made several students gasp. This, Tom said quietly, is Megalodon. It lived in Earth's oceans until about 3.5 million years ago. The great white shark we just discussed. He added a great white shark to the hologram for scale comparison. Would have been this creature's snack. Rod's containment bubble had turned a pale shade of green. That can't be right. The size ratio must be wrong. The scale is accurate, Tom confirmed. Megalodon reached lengths of up to 18 meters. Its mouth was large enough to swallow several humans at once. Its teeth alone were bigger than my hand. He held up his palm for comparison, then projected an image of a real Megalodon tooth next to it. Professor Gray's crystals had taken on a deep blue shade of fascination. And you have proof this creature existed. These aren't just legends. We find their teeth regularly, Tom explained. Thousands of them. You see, shark skeletons are made of cartilage, not bone, so they rarely fossilize. But their teeth are nearly indestructible. We found Megalodon teeth all over the world. He brought up a new diagram showing bite force calculations. Based on our studies, Megalodon had the strongest bite of any known creature in Earth's history. It could crush a whale's skull like we crack a nut. Click 7's antennae were trembling. Whales. Those are your largest living animals, correct? Yes. The blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived on Earth. And Megalodon hunted them. Tom paused to let that sink in. In fact, some scientists think Megalodon might have gone extinct partly because their prey became too good at avoiding them. The classroom was silent as Tom showed more reconstructions of Megalodon hunting scenes. The sheer scale of the prehistoric predator seemed to have stunned everyone into silence. But here's the really interesting part, Tom continued. Megalodon wasn't even the strangest thing in Earth's prehistoric oceans. We had marine reptiles that could grow just as large. Some had necks longer than our modern buses. Others had teeth the size of bananas. Mist had condensed into a tiny, dense ball of astonishment. Your world produced multiple creatures of this size. Oh yes, Tom nodded. Earth has gone through several periods where giant predators were common. The thing is, we're not entirely sure why they got so big. Our planet seems to encourage extreme evolution sometimes. Professor Gray floated closer to examine the Megalodon reconstruction. And humans evolved on this same planet. We did. Our earliest ancestors had to survive in a world where being eaten was a constant possibility. We couldn't outfight the predators, so we had to outsmart them. Tom smiled. That's why we might seem soft to you. We never needed to evolve natural weapons. We learned to use our minds instead. Rod's bubble had regained some of its normal color. But surely you're glad these monsters are extinct. Tom's expression turned serious. Actually, many humans wish they weren't. We have entire scientific fields dedicated to studying these creatures. Some scientists even dream about finding living prehistoric species in our deep oceans. You want them to still exist. Click 7's voice was barely a whisper. We're curious, Tom explained. That's another thing about humans. We want to understand everything, even the things that could kill us. Maybe especially those things. Professor Gray's crystals shifted to a color Tom hadn't seen before. I believe, the professor chimed, we may need to reconsider our classification of Earth as a moderate threat world. Perhaps, Tom agreed. But remember, modern sharks, the ones we showed earlier, we consider those to be fairly minor predators by Earth standards. The silence that followed was profound. Every alien student was now looking at their human classmate with new eyes, wondering what kind of species could evolve on a world where Megalodon was just one of many super predators. The next day, Tom walked into the classroom to find things had changed. Instead of the usual subtle shifting away from the soft species, his classmates made room for him in the center of the room. Rod's containment bubble actually moved closer to him. Tom, Rod's voice rippled through their liquid environment. I spent all night studying Earth's ocean life. Is it true that you have creatures called orcas that hunt great white sharks? Yes. Tom nodded. We call them killer whales, though they're actually dolphins. They're so intelligent that they figured out how to flip great whites upside down, which makes them go into a trance-like state. Then the orcas can eat them easily. Click 7's mandibles clicked rapidly. But yesterday you showed us how dangerous great whites are, and you have predators that hunt them for fun. Nature is full of surprises, Tom said with a smile. That's why humans learn not to underestimate any creature, no matter how harmless it might look. Professor Gray floated into the room, their crystals glowing with excitement. Class, I have an announcement. After yesterday's presentation, I've submitted a formal request to update our xenobiology database regarding Earth's classification. The professor turned to Tom. I have some questions, if you don't mind. You mentioned humans keep sharks in. What did you call them? Aquariums. Yes, Tom brought up a hologram of a large shark tank. We build huge tanks of water with thick glass walls. People can walk through tunnels surrounded by water and watch sharks swim over their heads. We even have special programs where children can learn about sharks up close. The class stared at the images in amazement. Mist condensed and expanded rapidly, their species equivalent of shaking their head. You put these predators on display. For entertainment. Not just entertainment, Tom corrected. For education. To help people understand them better. The more humans learn about sharks, the more we want to protect them. Protect them. Rod's bubble wobbled in confusion. From what? Tom's expression turned serious. From ourselves, mainly. Some humans hunt sharks for their fins or kill them out of fear. But more and more of us are fighting to save them. We've learned that every predator has an important role in nature's balance. Professor Gray's crystals pulsed with curiosity. This morning, I received 17 different requests from students wanting to study Earth's marine biology. It seems yesterday's presentation made quite an impression. If you're interested, Tom said, looking at his classmates, I could show you more. We haven't even talked about our deep-sea creatures yet. Wait until you see what lives in the parts of our oceans we haven't fully explored. Rod's bubble actually turned a bright shade of excitement. There's more. Would you be willing to help me with a comparative study of Earth's ocean predators and my world's hunters? I'd like that. Tom smiled. We could learn a lot from each other. Professor Gray chimed softly. I believe we already have. Tom has taught us something valuable about judging species by their appearance. Sometimes, the most remarkable adaptations are not physical at all. The class murmured in agreement. Even the students who had previously dismissed humans as soft were now looking through their datapads, studying Earth's wildlife with new interest. One last question. Click 7 raised a limb. You said sharks aren't even your most dangerous ocean predators. What is? Tom thought for a moment. That's difficult to answer. You see, the thing about Earth's oceans is that we're still discovering new species. There could be things down in the deep that we haven't even imagined yet. That's what makes Earth special. It never stops surprising us. As the class began their regular lessons, Tom noticed something had fundamentally changed. His classmates weren't just showing him respect. They were showing genuine curiosity about his world. And that, he thought, was the greatest success of all. After all, humans hadn't become a spacefaring species by being the strongest or the most dangerous. They had done it by being curious, by learning, and by understanding that sometimes the best way to survive wasn't to be the biggest predator, but to be the smartest prey.